Yeah, it's been an interesting 5 years, and getting to watch each other in the process and learn together, and get their mentored by the same people, and find out other avenues as well. Um, and yeah, it's always exciting times when we're involved in this, and everything's always constantly changing. Processes are always changing. Things are always changing. So yeah, there's always just new energy coming into this, and it's exciting to see how that transpires. So obviously there's a lot of different new faces that I haven't seen before on this call, some old ones. So that's always good to see. So some older heads that have been around for a while. Well, not older heads, but like they've been around in the game for around a similar amount of time, and some new faces. So it's always good to meet new people that are getting involved in what we're doing.
And man, I guess just to kick this off, I want to start this off in like a real inspiring thing. So for a dude that's been in this for 5 to 6 years, what is the most exciting thing that you see about Isagenix right now?
I think we're in the coming years, people are going to, when the company said that we're going to be a household name, I think people have liked that idea. I think they've thought that it sounds cool. But I think we're going to start to see that actually coming to fruition. People starting to understand that the likelihood of that coming to case is becoming a bit more real, and taking it a bit more seriously, and being a lot more prouder of what they're doing.
So when you say a household name, like, Apple's a household name. What else is a household name? Microsoft.
No.
These are household names. Is that what you mean? Like, you can see Isagenix as being something in the realms of those guys?
Yep. We're obviously launching into a lot of countries and everything, and going into Europe and whatnot, and South Korea just recently was announced. There's definitely things in the background that are being implemented. That one thing that's massive. One real massive thing that it will just put us will put us in a massive spotlight. There's only probably a handful of people that kind of are aware of what that is, but that's really exciting. That's going to be fantastic. I can't go into it. I hate that.
Are you allowed to share it, or is this?
No. I'm not even. I shouldn't even mention it, to be fair. But it's really exciting times. It's just going to be something like a lot of stuff that the company's doing that is allowing people to really understand that when the company says that it wants to, the things that it wants to do, it's not just saying that for good marketing. It's just not, right?
Yeah.
As we see, I mean, and again, like once you've been in the industry a while, you see a lot of companies and how they show up and things, and it's like, well, is it? Are they just saying the same things as what we hear from everywhere else? The same sort of promise, the same this, the same that. And then how do we separate from going, well, are we actually that different? Or are these people just spouting off the same way as everyone else is? And if people had those, then they're going to be slowly nullified for sure. And then people will be the people that have doubted and have their beliefs have not been a 10 in all the areas, they're going to kick themselves within the next year. I promise you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll have very little sympathy. So
yeah, but it's like, man, it's like, imagine, and I was talking to Gabby about this today, but it was like, when Steve Jobs started with the Apple vision, he was like, hey man, we're going to go do all this thing, right? He sold people this vision for simplicity, household computers, blah, blah, blah. When, Eric Coover and John Anderson, they came out, they're selling people on simplicity of like this Ayurvedic Chinese medicine, intermittent fasting, this system that could really integrate into anyone's life and be part of a household name. And, what we've seen that over the last, 15 to, how old is the company now? We're at 15 years, 16 years. So it's like, and we're close to $1 billion in revenue, which for a word of mouth company means that we're having that ripple effect. And we've seen that each out of the 4 to 5 countries that we've launched into, it's taken that first 4 to 5 years to really kick into momentum. So it's like, there's almost like a 5-year cycle with each country. We've launched into 14 or 16 now out of 88 registered countries. And it's just the social proof is getting better and we're having more impact. And, you know, we're starting to get into that early majority in most of those countries where more social belief is happening and where we are starting to become a household name. So I think that's such a really cool point, dude. And yeah, thanks for shedding light on that. And where do you see the company? Like, where do you see this company in the next 10 years, man?
This is the thing, is that, like, I've always been a fan of change. I've not really been scared of it, but with where we're going, it's hard for me to not feel a little bit scared, because the whole landscape of the company is going to change. It's going to be so different in the next coming years. And for me, it's going to be such big changes and such a shift in the whole dynamic of the company and the not so much the culture, but just, you know, with everything around it, it's going to go to another level. And I know how much of a level that is. And that's even sort of scary to me, that sort of level of change and going to that level, because we've been in it and we've only really been exposed to sort of like like some of the markets, like the Americans and New Zealand and Canada, to the events that we go to, right? And that's been the basis for a lot of the events that we've gone to, a lot of the speaking, a lot of you know, the leaders who are showing up at those things. We're going to be at events where it's just going to be so big that the events are going to get bigger. The culture, as far as how diverse it is around the world, and who we're seeing popping up as leaders and everything is going to be massive. And then, you know, for me, it's hard to explain, because it's hard to explain without feeling like you're like a hype man. It's really hard. Like I'm really trying not to. That's why my words are not coming out.
This is hype for you, by the way.
Well, yeah. I'm very rational and level-headed, pragmatic in my thinking all the time. So I'm not deluded when I say things.
Yeah.
And I trust that people take that for verbatim. But
let's capture that for a sec, Benny. Let's capture that for a sec. And I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a small tangent.
Yeah.
But what I'd love to share with the crew is more about your like individual story. So for anyone on here where like you might have just started your product journey, or you're in that space where you've helped yourself and maybe you're still helping yourself and you've helped a handful of people. When you started this journey, your rationalism, you know, you from starting this with your sister for like what, a year, 2 years? Do you want to just take us through like your health journey, just from, you know, just a 30-second version, man, and then we'll go into like your business story and how you actually started to get to where you are now.
Yeah, well, I got started purely because my sister annoyed the shit out of me for about 6 months about it. I didn't listen to it because I didn't want. So this is the thing. People think that ISA is a weight loss thing because that's just what the majority need in the world, let alone what they need for isogenics for, but in the world in general, right? Fat loss that's statistically the number one. So then anything you construe as being a diet, you signify as being a weight loss thing. And at the time, I felt like that she was trying to get me to implement something that's like her athletes and people that she was working with were going to be using. I just wasn't after those sorts of results. I just didn't hear her out. I just didn't feel like from what I knew was an absolute. And again, like this is the danger of feeling like the information you have is absolute. That'll be that'll be what messes your life up most, is an absolute attitude. And that's what I was carrying at the time. Eventually I gave her the time pretty much, and she sat me down and she studied exercise and health science. So she dominated and she picked the holes of things that I hadn't paid attention to that maybe would affect my results in a better way, that wasn't using the same system just for me to put on size, because I'd been an endurance athlete playing soccer for most of my life, and coming out of that I wanted to put on some weight, which was tough. So When she explained what it was going to do for me in retrospect of that, again, I was going to trial and error it. All right, I'll see. And again, I say to people, and for anyone that's on this call, the most influential people are the least likely to be influenced. This is what you got to take a real good hard look at. This is the thing. If you're scared of people because you think they're going to be hard to influence, and you're just going for people that you feel are easy to influence, that could be a reason why your business isn't moving. Because the most influential people are not the easiest to influence. And if you're scared to do that, then you're not getting game players on your team. I'm sorry. But this is because, again, you're going to have to get around those people at some point. It may as well be, sooner rather than later. But she took a skeptic, me, changed me up, got me to sort of see a different way. I tried it. It worked. I couldn't argue. I was getting results. They were noticeable. And again, for the pragmatist, pragmatism doesn't care what sounds right. I mean, it doesn't care how good something sounds or anything. It only cares about tangible, noticeable results in behavior caused by a difference of behavior. And what causes it is less the thing, right? So when it was causing results, I would have looked more stupid being a pragmatist to say that that wasn't the case, and that's just cognitive dissonance. You know what I mean? So,
so how long did it take her, Peter, to convince you to get started? And by convincing, like obviously she held that space. There's a sister-brother thing going on. In the same way, it's very hard for me to help my family. There's that, you still remember them as being the younger or the older brother, that the sister that you've done stupid things with. So it's like, how long did that take? And obviously the key point was, like you said, she identified problems that you had, not problems that she thought you needed to be solved. And that was when you started to listen. So how long did that process take?
Well, this is the thing. She didn't know that she was getting paid by ISA when she was recommending it to me. She didn't know. We didn't know that. We didn't know what the industry was. We'd never heard about it. Didn't know the business structure. Didn't know it existed. Didn't know it was a thing. So she got on board. Then it worked well. She didn't know. Again, she didn't know she was getting paid. This is just what she was recommending to people. So every single day, she'd just be saying, "Try this. This is better than what you're using." And I just kind of was like, "You're just trying to annoy me, right? You're not a dude trying to put on size. Like, when you are, then I might listen to you." And that was just that was my ego, right?
Yeah.
Sort of not wanting my little sister to sort of be right in a sense. So eventually, again, it was, and it was also a little bit of third-party validation. My girlfriend at the time said to me, "Look, I'm gonna think about doing it, and I'm gonna listen to Peter and hear what she says. I think you should too." And I was kind of like, "All right." So I sat down begrudgingly. Within about 30 minutes, she talked about how I wasn't tending to my cortisol levels. It wasn't because working out and everything was obviously going to encourage the production of that. Whether or not I was eating well and getting a lot of sleep, the fact that I was working out was destroying me and creating cortisol regardless. Whether or not my the branched chain amino acids in the products I was using had been affected. Whether or not they're actually as in their proper profile as they were supposed to be, whether or not I was actually absorbing a lot of the nutrients that I was putting into my body. These are none of the things I was taking into account. I was taking into account, okay, I'm training, I'm eating. None of the connectors. And I wasn't, and those were things I didn't take into account. And this is why a lot of people that we come up against say, eating an whole-food diet and exercise, that's the answer. And it's just like,
what about gut health? What about stress? What about this? What about that? What about that? Yeah, exactly.
No, it's not. I'm sorry, but like,
yeah,
we don't live in. I mean, that would have been good in another day and age, but in this day and age, it just doesn't cut it because there's too many things that are affecting them. Stress being one of them, and there's a lot of reasons why that gets promoted in the body due to the circumstances of our living stuff, and those are things that a lot of times just a whole food diet and exercise is just not attending to. We need to be able to plug those holes, and it needs to come in supplementation.
Yeah.
And again,
Whole
I've
food
gone to disprove.
Yeah.
I've gone to work to disprove that as well. This is a thing. It's like a lot of the time, sometimes maybe not. A lot of the time, I like to go and question my own reasoning to see if there's holes, and go and get some sort of consistency within it. And I'm not one for like. I don't argue when we talk to people about this, but at the end of the day, I guess statistically wise, we're number one solutions-based company in Australia. So I mean, that's the provide solutions. So I mean, our theories
we're getting results. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're founded. They're not unfounded. They're not based off of nothing. So,
just to bring you back on track, dude. So, like, you're the rational skeptic. You're the influencer who was already influential, like in your networks, playing sport, all that type of stuff. And Peter was able to talk to you on a level where she could influence the influencers, right? Now, for anyone else listening, you don't necessarily have to have that level of knowledge, because we've got people like that in the community that already have that knowledge, or there's tools, or there's articles that have been written, right? Which we didn't have in the beginning. So Peter had to be the source of information, but now we can leverage people with a connection or a call, and probably like get that information to someone a bit quicker, and we can do our own due diligence. But so Peter got started, and then was it like a year or 2 years later that you got started, or is it a bit closer to the beginning?
I was a product user for about 14 odd months. And again, that wasn't strategical. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to grow. And like, I didn't even know I needed to grow myself at that point. It wasn't like I didn't know what personal development was. I didn't know you develop yourself. I had a very fixed mindset. And that was probably the biggest cause of all my issues in my life, was the fact that I had a fixed mindset. Right.
Yeah. And this is, so you didn't share it with anyone in that first 14 months of using the products?
My girlfriend. When I enrolled, my girlfriend said, if you enroll, I'll let you enroll me. And that was my first person. So and then there was someone else, but it was a family friend, and my sister enrolled them underneath me. That was it.
Okay,
and then they fell off. So then it was like, they were my two first people. And again, I just kind of got to stuff in support of my sister. A large part of me doing this was the fact that I saw how passionate she was about that, and I've always backed my family and what they wanted to do. And I think showing up for her and this was important for us both. And again,
but it took time. It took time, dude, didn't it? Like you were there supporting her, like, oh, I'll do the products, and then it's like, oh, now I show up to her events. But like, you know, you were telling yourself that you're showing up for her, but like secretly deep down, there was something else that was getting you in there as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was like a curiosity.
Yeah. I mean, I come to a point in life where I don't really have a lot of grounds to stand on as far as thinking my avenues of going about things were right and working. So I then I became open-minded because I was like at a place in life where I was rock bottom.
Yeah.
Probably the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
To be fair, that's probably the best thing that ever happened to me. It really was. It really was. And so I started to just keep going and stuff. And then eventually, just from wanting to support and back her in, and again, we had some of our friends that were involved, so we'd all hang out together. I kind of think that a lot of time I may not have gone if they weren't going to. I kind of felt like it was like getting to hang out as well.
Make it fun, make it community.
Yeah, and then I just got a kickback of like I might have learned something. Then there was starting to be things. There started to be common themes of things that I never even thought were things to think about were becoming so prevalent that I was like, shit, how much don't you know? Like, I was just like, it wasn't even about learning a heap. It wasn't even like gaining knowledge. It was just like, how much don't you know? How little do you know? How little do you know about how things go and the world and yourself and like about yourself? Because then I was like, people were being able to say things that could verbalize things about me that I couldn't even put into words. And I was like, how are that, you know? So that made me very curious. That made me curious.
Is this sort of is this when you woke up? Like, cause like this is, I think everyone can relate to this as well in one way, shape or form. You know what I mean? Whether it's this community or something else, but it's like you'll step into something. And I think the cool thing for everyone listening is the first 14 months, Ben just used the products, right? He was you love the gym, you love sport, and you love the results you're getting from it. And I know your personal journey in a bit more detail, but you were using the gym as a way to build self-confidence, right? Mm-hmm. Even though you're a looking dude, even though most girls would look at you twice walking down the street. Internally, there was this internal struggle going on as well. And then, 14 months into it, you've hit this rock bottom point, which I think, again, we can all relate to. And this is when, you started surrounding yourself with this community and this consciousness that was pretty high vibration. Like your sister started talking different language. Yeah, I know Jacob was, I know Mary was. And then all of a sudden we started connecting. And I think that's when I plugged into your community or the community as well. And I know that I was at a rock bottom point. I was looking for that vibration as well, right? And so what happened from this point? Like, because this is where we really step into your business journey. You were working as a bricklayer. You had the mortgage. Mentally there was some stuff going on. What happened from this dip? And if you're open to it, what was actually going on in that moment that made you then look at this as a viable option? And I guess from there, how did you help your first 10 people and so on and so forth?
Yeah. Because I think this was probably the biggest thing if I look back at and I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I was always looking for, I was looking for different opportunities, different jobs. It wasn't even opportunities, it was different job roles, right? Things to learn, but I was kind of stuck because I couldn't leave my job, take the time away from my job to go and learn something to get a high paying job because I had this debt. And I couldn't go get a job that I enjoyed maybe a bit better, but get paid less because then that affected it. So in a sense, I was like stuck, but my energy of wanting to invite the curiosity around something coming to me, it just so happened to show up as this. I'd looked at other things and potentially wanted to go and they fell flat. Fell flat. And I think that was just, I think that want for that to show up kept throwing opportunities. And then I guess, was lucky enough to finally grasp this one. Yeah. So,
but yeah, so let's go deeper, man. So if you're open to it, like what did it actually feel like? Bricklayer, big freaking mortgage, going to the gym, self-confidence wasn't the highest. And you're like, shit, man, something's got to change. What's the point that you actually went, hey, I'm going to show up in this space and I'm actually going to take on network marketing as like a legitimate thing?
Yeah. It was hard though. Like being around people that are like got goals and aspirations and positive was unusual to me. The people I was hanging around with was like, how much money can we make this weekend at this party from the drugs we deal?
Yep.
That's pretty much it. That was that too. And then you get thrown into an environment where people are like happy and shit. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Bullshit. Like, it was just annoying. Like I was just annoyed by it a lot of the time. It was just hard to be around. It's like, why do you get to be?
And that was your own projection. Yeah. That was like internal.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with anyone else. It was all me. But it was tough. I just stuck around. I just stuck to it. But again, my ideology around my identity. This is why I work so much around my identity work. That's why I feel like it's so important, because I feel like that where I was at was just led because of my identity around myself, and who I envisioned for myself was very limited. And it caused, I set myself up to be miserable. Like
unconsciously, unknowingly,
unconsciously,
right? Just the people hanging around, the community, mindset, was very, it was fixed. Yeah. And then someone's come in and they've gone, hey, here's a positive community. And this is really important, guys, because you are going to be that positive person for somebody else. Or you might be plugging into this community to be surrounded by positive people so that you can have the time to learn to change your mindset as well, right? And then you'll have your own wake up moment. You have that time where you go, holy shit, like, and you actually want to be more around that. And then like Ben, like you said before, man, which is so freaking important, is you start to hear the messages. Like the same conversations that have probably been going on in your life like for 12 months, right? Peter had probably been saying the same stuff from Bob Berg, the same stuff from all these people. You've seen the same memes on social media, but then one day all of a sudden they made sense, right? And that's when I think, you know, we really take that into our own biological story and we start to believe that we too can do it ourselves. And I guess that's the point that you got to, right? And you're like, holy shit, this is actually an opportunity that I can step into. And your first step wasn't to go be Peter Kelly, was it? It wasn't to like get on stage and create events. You literally just started to show up at her events, show up on Zooms like this and share your story to give your piece of the story to the equation. And you'd like relate with so many business builders, with so many construction workers, with so many tradies. You might not necessarily relate with the mum, you know, like who's got 4 kids at home, right? But you'd relate on a level of, holy shit, like this kid reminds me of my son. So maybe then the mum would be able to relate to your story. So it's the power of like you actually being vulnerable enough to wake up and then to share your story and also to work with Peter and then, you know, Mary and everyone else and grow that positive community. So that, man, I applaud you for that. And that was probably a big reason why I stepped into this space as well, dude. And, you know, I was like, holy shit, if someone like Ben can do this, you know, like where he's come from and what his mindset was, I was like, surely, man, I can figure out my own way. And it still took me 5 years and it's still going, right? But that's such an epic thing from you, man. So probably the next thing, dude, is like, how did you then go? Like, let's talk about how you actually get your business kicked off. So how did you help your first 10 people? How did you make your first $1,000? What did you do?
When I started, I didn't have any form of social media. My opinion was, I had a very negative view on social media, to be fair. I figured if I want to talk to someone, they've got my phone number.
They'll call me.
That was that, like, I was like, no one cares about, and still to an extent, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one cares. Like, I was just like, no one cares about like really what I've got going on. Like, who cares? Like, that's how I kind of like looked at myself as well. I was like, I don't even care about I don't even care about myself right now. What makes anyone think that? You know, that's where I started at. That's
a bit more introverted, rather than being this sort of extroverted, like putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I mean, that was always a stretch. I mean, I've always got my energy sort of being by myself or in small groups. I don't get energized by being in large groups. It's sort of me flexing a bit of range and slowly but surely you become confident within those sorts of things so you can be in it. But I definitely get drained a hell of a lot from it. So what happened was Peter put me into an Ice Derby team. She didn't even put me in her own team. She thought I was going to be useless. So she just didn't think
Ice Derby team. That was number one.
Yeah, she put me in that, and then that kind of forced me it kind of made me know what was required, what needed to be done. And because I've been so accustomed to doing things in a team environment, I just didn't want to let anyone down. That was it. Like, I was just like, I'm not going to be the one that lets us down. So it forced me. That was like, so then it was like, it wasn't like I was fearful. I was still fearful. It's just that I had a different fear. And the other fear overrode the fear of me actually going and doing it. It was like the fear of feeling like you're less, like, because when you're playing soccer in sport, it's the worst thing. Like when I played, like feeling like you gave away a penalty. That's the worst feeling ever. Right? Yeah. And
so you'd be a terrible golfer, a terrible tennis player, but put you in a team environment and you come alive.
Yeah, because it's just like you got people relying on you, and that's sort of, you know, what I based a lot of my pros and things that kind of hindered me a little bit was definitely that. So then I just I obviously went to the people that I knew the closest. And again, it was hard for them to kind of respect my opinion because I hadn't been there yet, right? But they gave it a go.
Did you go for the business or the products?
Both. Yeah. Both. I shared. We always had the attitude of sharing both. We saw this as holistic well-being. We shared where we were going. I shared the vision for where we were going, what it was going to look like, the potential. I never kind of inflated anything. I was always in congruency with where I was at in the journey, but where I was at and where I was progressing was actually still good enough for a lot of people. Like if I shared I made an extra $300 that week, people would scoff at that, maybe potentially scoff at that now, but I was so excited by that. For me to be getting something like getting $300 on the side, like now it's hard for me to imagine being excited by that. But at the time, I was, and I was sharing that, dude, I just got another extra 300. Like, and people downplay that now because they see how much money a lot of people are making. But again, when we started, we didn't have that much prevalent success. So that was almost like beneficial to us because we weren't like, we were just like, we were like this. Like, we didn't even know what anyone else was doing. Didn't care. Yeah. But now everyone's like so exposed to everything, and they're like that. Right. And that was like one of the biggest things. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, there's some other people doing this somewhere else.
Yep.
I thought this is just where we were at. Yep. Like, we weren't worried about it. We were literally doing our own thing the way that we wanted to do it, and with obviously morally and in integrity with the company's values. So
you made your first $300. You paid off your mortgage for your house, and then like so that's like what, this is the ISO Derby team. You've helped your first 10 people get involved. That's that's like a 2-month period after 14 months of just using the products. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd built up a lot of knowledge by that point. So I was kind of like, I knew how to do a lot. I just didn't apply any of it.
Boom.
Strategically,
I think a lot of people
I would recommend. Yeah. A lot of people come up to me and like, oh, you know what? They use that part of my story as a crux. I'm just going to take the next 14 months to work on myself and get the skills, and I'm going to apply it later like that. It's like, no, that wasn't strategical, right? I would have learned 10 times more if I had just applied as I went along. And then I started to get into social media. I got social media begrudgingly. Posting on social media was a massive fear of mine. Just anything, posting anything. I remember when I got it, people were like, what the, like, you've got Facebook? And then it took me a lot longer to get on Instagram. But then 95% of my business was built from social media. Because again, at the time, I still wasn't necessarily the best connector in person. I had a long way to go with that because I was typically, I was in an industry which didn't really need to promote any sort of interpersonal skill sets. I just had to throw bricks up. That was it. So coming into this, I had a lot to learn in a lot of different areas. So I just gave a lot of my time to that, and eventually it all ticked over. I started to build up confidence. Like I just kind of was like, okay, you're going to do this. It wasn't even like I was going to achieve this. It was like, you're going to do this week. And then I do it and I go, all right. And then that's how, like, for me, teaching people, like, the number one way to build belief is just become someone that does what they say they're going to do. No matter how big or small, you'll be able to start to push it more further out. So if it's like, oh, I'm going to speak to 5 people this week, regardless of the outcomes, if that's what you've been able to prove yourself that you've been able to do that, you start to form more of those exposures where you do what you said you're going to do. That's how belief grows in yourself, even if it's irregardless of the results. It's not like I believe in myself because I achieved this or whatever. It's like I believe in myself because I'm capable of doing. And this is what keeps people in the game longer, is that people come, and we're a community of people that need, and a lot of my methods are sort of contradictive to, because it is a lot of numbers. And I think that's what allowed me to stay in the game, because a lot of people were moving a lot faster than what I was in the early stages, and I watched them. But I knew that who was going to hold the level of success I wanted wasn't me. Wasn't the dude that I was. And so I was quite happy at the time, kind of doing things that just I had a vision for myself. Like I knew what I needed to look like, not physically, but like if I looked in the mirror, I know what I needed to look at myself and see. And I knew what he could do. So I knew what he could do. So then I was like, okay, well, you just need to start living in more of the vein of who you foresee to be able to hold that. And so it gave me a lot of the time more joy in the process, because even though I may not have got yeses or anything like that, I was doing what the more express version of myself could do. And I could find a gain in that. Because this is what happens is then if we don't have anything to positively receive, like a legitimate positive reaction to taking action, we have negative reinforcement, which is if I do this, this result. But if you have something that goes, I can gain something from this. And again, so you obviously had your goals, and I had my personal Ben goals, which were who could hold this. And because I was so much more focused on this, I was doing that stuff because it took me a step closer to who could hold it. And then these things were just coming as a second, as a byproduct. So then the speaking was I'm not going to go and do this speaking at this event for 30 seconds on branched chain amino acids and the protein and the extraction process and all that. Right. I was like, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't feel like, but I was like, the expression of the version that can hold the life you want can. And it wasn't even like he can be good or he can be bad. It's just like, he just can do that. He's just capable of going up and doing that. That's it. And then it just go and built and built and built. And that attitude led me to being able to very nonchalantly, without fucking no practice, go and talk in front of 6,000 people like their opinions don't matter shit. Right.
Yeah.
And that
because
was
that much belief in yourself, right? That was the key thing.
Yeah, but it was like, that was behind the scenes a lot, but I did those things. And then eventually it was just exposure therapy. Like I just became exposed to it so much that it became comfortable. And it's not like I care, but not to the extent that I was afraid to go and do it, because I could see, like, if I asked myself, can Ben do this and take this criticism and take judgment from 5,000? Yeah, he can. That's the type of Ben that can hold that sort of success. So, and I did it, and I didn't even need to be good or bad because I'd already gotten the result that I wanted. Because I could then go and look at myself, well, you're a legend. The fact that you're so stifled by this, but you've done it anyway. I didn't need anyone to give me any applause. I didn't need to, because I was doing it to myself. And people were waiting for everyone to go and do it for themselves. But like my measures and the way that I went about things allowed people to applaud themselves quietly in their heads. Yeah. And that's what I was able to do. And then you can start behaving in a manner which is not bound by like the results dictating your worth.
Yeah.
And that's why it looked so free. Like people come up and it's like, oh, it's so natural. No, it's just I've created something in my head to give me some sort of level of freedom that it's not relied upon the result.
Can I capture this for a second, man? Because I think the reason why I want to get Ben on for this call is because you see a lot of people come into like this isogenic space and they're like high energy. They're like, rah, they're like the big star. They're out on stage shining the light on everyone. Ben's almost the exact opposite, you know, and the cool thing about his story is, you know, the first 14 months, and I think a lot of you can relate to this, he only helped like one or two people. And it was all about his own personal health journey. It was all about internally just, you know, feeling better, right? And just using what he loved anyhow. And then they got to a point where he was immersed in a community for like the next 6 months. So like say 14 months to 2 years, where he started to think differently and he started to really challenge the way that he thought about himself. And like, this is that waking up experience, at that point that you become more conscious. And that's all about being a product of the environment, right? And he noticed he had two environments. He could go out and party with those guys on the weekend, or he could pop into an environment where people were talking positively and talking about Bob Berg and the Go-Giver and Tony Robbins and that type of stuff. And naturally, you start to like move away from this environment and move into more supportive environments. And then just being in that space, there were more conversations going on. There was more self-belief. There was more things going on. And the funny thing is that Isogenics, in a weird way, they call it a self-development program with a compensation plan. And it's because it holds that space for you for long enough to internally build your health up. The gut-brain link is phenomenal. It's as good as any self-help book in the world. Then you get challenged from all these different angles to start to really build your own identity and then transcend yourself to then go start helping other people. And I guess this is where like 2 years in, you'd probably only still helped, maybe 10 or 15 people. Would that be right?
No, I would have been... It would have been more of that. But to be fair, most of the people I brought on, I've met after I started ISA.
Yeah,
for sure. And then I had to learn social media.
Yeah,
it's so like all these things I just had to learn. Like I had to learn that aspect. I had to learn that aspect. I had to learn that aspect.
Yeah.
But again, I think the biggest thing that's beneficial to anyone in coming into this is I have to have a level of curiosity to want to seek out information and take it on. I think this is a big thing. And this is maybe where my strength was, is that we now in a society have become so accustomed to, I need to be told what to learn.
Yeah.
And it was, so I'm schooling with this, and this is why people are always looking for book recommendations.
Yeah.
And if I tell people my process of how I go and find something that's so obscure that no one else has mentioned, and I go to the bookstore, I pick it up and I read it. I'm not waiting to be told, right? And then and that was the thing. It's like, I wasn't waiting. I was going to go and dig for the information. I had that curiosity. That was probably one of the biggest things. But at the same time, I understood that knowledge doesn't necessarily mean personal growth. Like, you can read a whole of a lot, but doesn't mean you're growing. You can just know more. But unless your behavior changes, you're not growing. So how does your behavior change? You have to do a lot of things that conflict with your ego. And a lot of time that feels like shit. So then if you really want to understand the process, it's like, you have to feel like shit a lot. And trying to avoid it means you're not growing. That's just a clear cut as it is. And people run away from that. But you know what the interesting thing about that is that then you feel shit anyway, because then the overriding feeling of not living into your potential shows up. And then you're just stuffed either way. So you may as well be doing one that goes and progresses you, or get what happens when you don't live into your potential. There's the two choices. They both feel like shit, right? Yeah. And I'm telling you right now, like, people that feel the shit,
progressive one ends up in a pretty cool space.
Yeah. Like, then you get to, like, you choose your challenges. This is the thing. You choose your challenges rather than letting your challenge choose you, because you're avoiding ones that go and enhance you and move you forward as a person. So knowing that means you go, okay, I know this is a challenge and everything, and I'm scared of this, but if I don't adopt this, I'm not growing, which means I'm going to get lumped challenges that I don't necessarily want, and then not necessarily progressing me. So then the fear becomes, well, I know this is a challenge, but I don't get to be void of them. If I choose mine and I know they somewhat progress me as a human being in alignment with what my vision is, then that can be fun. But again, then it's exposure to it then becomes you then love that. And you know, that's that masochistic sort of like going after fear is what led me to doing the public speaking, was because it was just like, this is testing your potential. And then like, again, if you can go and question, I've been talking a lot about this, if you can even question your purpose and even pay attention to your potential, you're in like the top percentage of people that have been able to satisfy most of the basic needs. And I speak to people, and I know when they don't feel like they're living, they're entertaining their potential, that's when they feel the worst. I've seen people that have the best lives, but if there's not a continual stressing of their potential or paying attention to it and flexing of it, you can have everything and still not feel like this for me is where I've seen people earning exorbitant amount of money, having these lives, but still feeling like shit, is because they've reached a point where they're not flexing their potential anymore. And that was a point that I got to at some point. I got to that point. I was like, fuck, I've got all this stuff. And I'm like, because I wasn't flexing my potential.
Got to keep growing, man. And this is really important, right? So, because I'm going to be mindful of everyone's time. So in 2 years, man, you grew from a construction worker who, you know, wasn't interested in any positivity in any way, shape or form, to all of a sudden 2 years later, you're now immersed in it. And over the next 3 years to where you are now, what's been the outcome? Like, what would be the outcome of who Ben is now compared to who he was before? Like, obviously, there's an income component. So, like, if you open a share, what would be like an average income for Ben Kelly this week through ISA?
Oh, geez. Look, to be honest, it's gotten to a point where I don't even pay attention to my bank account. I've got a PA that does all that stuff. And because again, like, I never got into this to be really rich or anything. I wanted ease and simplicity, and I've got that. So, I mean, obviously it's very sporadic. I'm guessing probably this week last week was like 9.5 or something.
So 10 grand residual.
That was just residual. That wasn't like
that's not working income.
That was in residual. Yeah. That's
So that's $500,000, right, a year, just residually. So 5 years down the track, you've gone from construction worker who was working his ass off, laying X amount of bricks, you know, unconscious, not awake, pretty negative with the world, to 5 years down the track, being a dude that's completely awoken, someone who's speaking in front of 5,000 plus people. I know that you're now running your own self-development course, you know, with Joel Brown and those guys, and you actually got an event coming up in Perth. I know that you're obviously living in Bali. You've got your, like, this lifestyle that really lights you up, and you give back and you serve, but your deep core hasn't really changed, and you still go out and impact people with this vehicle, and it's actually permitted you the time, the freedom, the location freedom to then go on and do this true potential stuff, which is the thing that you said was it was more painful to not grow into that potential than it was to actually step into it and overcome those challenges to actually grow and progressively be the person that you're growing into now. And I imagine the next 10 years, dude, it's going to be, we're going to be talking to a different band again and again, right? But, I just wanted to really share that and really applaud you for that journey, because, it's pretty powerful, and I think a lot of people can relate to it in their own way. But probably the last thing I'd love to finish with, man, because I want to really respect everyone's time. But if you were to start this all over again, like you're starting fresh, you're Ben Kelly, you've got this level of consciousness, how would you start your Isagenix business today? And what vision would you cast?
Oh, God. I mean, I just get like... Jeez,
what would you do, man?
I know. I kind of liked how messy it was. Looking back at it, geez, I don't know. I think if
you had to build it up to like a $10,000 residual income business a week, what would you do? What would you do differently, or would you do it the same?
Oh, I wouldn't change much. I think that all the stuff that I did that wasn't great allows me to sort of can resonate with people coming through. I think I think that the things you don't do well in this business are sometimes just as important, because then you can relate. You can definitely be more relatable, which is important for our people to understand that you didn't just show up one day and work it out. Again, my belief is I know very little. That's what it is. I know where I need to grow, and probably those things that I know I currently need to grow in are things that maybe I delve into a little bit more earlier. I mean, again, the reality around what we do is we're in sales. Without sugarcoating it, let's be real.
We sell ourselves every day. Absolutely.
There's an exchange. People have a problem with sales. Is not. It's like the highest, the biggest industry in the world. You know what I mean? And we try to scoot around. It's like, sales is beautiful. I'm going to provide a solution to you. You're in exchange for something. That's just the laws of the world. And again, that's where a lot of coaches and stuff have an issue, because that's probably going off.
No, but the thing is, the point is like, if you actually solve a problem for somebody, there's an exchange of value, right? And the beauty about this is it's something that you've already done, something that you're sharing with your own, integrity. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. And the best thing is like, be your best customer. Like, you use the products for 14 months and then you organically transcended yourself and started sharing it once you believed that you could, right? And then you started helping other people solve problems. And then all of a sudden the compensation did its thing. Your sister chucked you in an ISA derby. It was messy. It was shit. You didn't know what was up, what was down. You grew, you went through some pits, and then all of a sudden 5 years later, by just holding that course and growing, with Peter and with the community that we created, all of a sudden you're earning $10,000 a week residually. And the question is, would you go through it all again?
Yeah. The good thing about this is that we all get to be in the same, all the things that go on with building this business is understood by everyone else that builds his business. If you're going to go and try and do something else, it's a lot of times a very lonely road. People can't understand what you're going through, right? But I think the thing was, I'd go through it again, being around quality people. You know what I mean? I think going through this, we came up against a lot of stuff. People got to remember, we had gnarly stuff. Like,
we had a lot of unconscious people. It was a world that is not understood. It's common now.
I don't want to scare people. But this is like, when people come to me and they're like afraid, and I wish I could just share with them what if they think that their level of negative, like, and I don't want to try and compete in this area, but it was not good, to the point where police and lawyers and stuff were like, and personal safety was right. And
tell us the worst, Morgan says. Tell us the worst, man.
Tell us the worst.
If you can tell us the worst, I'm sure everyone else's will feel pretty inadequate, you know?
Well, and this is what built our character. I mean, we had a lot of character coming through. This is why we're so solid. This is why we show up how we are. Do you think then talking in front of a lot of people really bothered us? Like, a lot of things that were not great along the way really primed us to be able to do things that most everyday people aren't willing to do. And I'm grateful for those things. Yeah. I'm grateful for those people for what they did, right? But this is the thing. There was groups designed, Facebook groups designed to basically destroy everything that we were doing. It was almost like it was a full-time job for them to basically they know the ins and outs of our lives. I think a lot of them knew me and they knew my past, so they didn't go after me. I felt like that pissed me off a bit more because I felt like I was a bit gutless. I think they kind of knew that. And again, we're talking, they knew the old Ben. They still thought that I was the old Ben. So I guess but messing with the people around me kind of like that pissed me off a bit more. But things like,
so there's a lot of trolling. There were groups created to.
There was trolling, but like people would put out calls to find out where my sister and our friends were living, to get naked photos of them, to send them to find out where we live, to do all this stuff, right? And as someone that grew up in a house full of women, as this only man in a house at 6 years old, I'd become accustomed to having knee-jerk reactions to defending my family.
Yeah.
And they it pissed me right off, tell you the truth. But I didn't react. I didn't react because I was just like, look, we're just going to outlast them and we're going to outbuild, and they're going to get tired. They're going to get tired before we get tired. And that's what happened. Now they don't post in the group. Nothing gets done, but we outlasted them. We outdid them. We don't think about them ever. Like, we never think about them. They
probably tried the program as well.
Hey?
They've probably tried the program and they're probably not living into their truest potential because they're so worried about what you guys are doing.
Well, probably
go up to their own cycle now, which is kind of cool as well, right? Because we all go through our own journey in our own way, and there's no animosity, there's no anything. Like, it just is. And I was a huge skeptic for the first 9 months, man, when Peter and you guys were doing it. But I still showed up. You know what I mean? I still had that curiosity. And, you know, people would talk to me negatively about it, and sometimes I buy into it, sometimes I wouldn't. But then the social proof and the alignment and the congruency and the values comes up, and then you see something for what it truly is over time, which is, you know, like, we get people, and you probably got the same in your group, where there's like, people have lost 5 kilos, you know, this has happened, that's happened. And then all of a sudden we start plugging into a completely different frequency, and we stop seeing that negativity. It just doesn't exist, right? And then people throw that at your way, and the mud just doesn't stick because it's their own mud. And then all of a sudden that starts to transcend as well. And I guess, you know, that probably took 3 years of actually building your own character and your own confidence and your own future vision, your own self, to not let that mud stick. Because I take it early days, like, a lot of that stuff got you, right? And I know it got me, because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on.
It took a lot of restraint, to be fair. And that was part of my process. I understood that who was going to be able to hold that sort of level of success isn't going to have the same knee-jerk reactions as what old Ben used to do. And he let his emotions subside, and he acted from a stoic position. He responded in turn. He didn't respond out of emotion. And that was the biggest way of me being able to flex that. And that's why it's become easier now, especially when you start to develop a big team. You've got different personality types. You're going to have to learn to be able to not let your emotions be able to dictate how you communicate with people in conflict, because you're going to get it. So I think if that was serviceable in that aspect as well. So looking back, there's pros and cons of everything. So us getting that level of hate also meant that we developed another level of leadership in in allowing us to sort of become a bit more emotionally intelligent, be able to have less knee-jerk reactions and act upon things in the emotion, and being able to sort of subside, let it do its thing, start to go back into a more of a masculine sort of energy and have a good think, and strategically sort of respond in a manner that, and to be, still to this day, sometimes I don't act in that accordance. It's becoming less often, especially in business. I'm much better. Sometimes in personal, sometimes a little bit harder. But those things we talk about often, and not into detail, obviously, but it was super beneficial, and I'm grateful for the way that played out. At the time, it was annoying, frustrating, but obviously it developed things in us that allowed us to be able to have success, but also prolong it and continue having success. So,
and dude, just if we can just hold that for a sec, I want to give this back to the crew right now. So anyone that's listening, I see Rafaela, Monica, Brendan, Simone, Christina, like, just write, what is one challenge, you know, that's just hit you right in the heart, something that just hit you left of center, you never expected to have to overcome, you know, by stepping into this community or stepping into this space. What would be one challenge that you're having right now, or something that you've just overcome? And share that in the chat box, because, you know, Ben's been vulnerable enough to share some of his biggest challenges and his biggest fears. And again, you know, the reason why we get stories on and we get people like Ben on these Mondays is to really, is to just to make this more human, you know, impacting and helping people with their health. That's one thing, you know, going on your own health journey, that's another. But then actually being able to create an enterprise that frees your time and location, that's leveraging yourself up to a whole different level of consciousness and self-development and overcoming challenges. So just in the chat box below, just share, what is one challenge that you're having right now, or something that you've overcome? I'll just hold that space, Ben, and we'll get some of those out, man. And then we'll finish up in 2 minutes, because whilst they're doing that, Ben, the last thing I'd love to ask you, man, is like, what would be the 3 keys to building a successful Isagenix business in the next 5 years? Is it the simplicity? Is it the leverage? Is it community? Is it events?
Leverage is a massive one.
Don't answer it yet. Just have a think about it, man. Just one sec. We'll just do these things. Have a think about it. So Christina said, she shared her story and her photos to people, and it scares the heck out of us. That was a big challenge. Being vulnerable enough to share your results, right? Christina, I really admire you for that. Brendan, losing access to my kids. Okay. Was that from going on your health journey, or was that by stepping into the business? Natasha, so hard convincing my family how freaking awesome it is. And that's an important point as well, is convincing. Remember, not everyone's ready to take a health behavior change, and people will still remember, like Ben. People remember Ben as old Ben, you know, the Ben that was out at party. So all of a sudden he's coming up with a health journey. You know, that it might take some time for them to be inspired by your journey enough to ask you about it and want to go on it with you as well. Answering the phone and making phone calls took 8 months to be able to speak to people on our phone, customers, new customers. Christine, Paul posting on social media as I have self-doubt. Ben talked all about that. I was the same. As a physio, I was scared what people would think if I was posting, you know, this type of stuff. You know, I had my image and my brand, right? Rafaela, my challenge is that I want to approach this without using social media for now. So you just want to do it organically. I reckon that's the best way to do it. Definitely talk to people, but then connect them with people. And going into personal training at a high volume gym, that's where I want to really run with this. But I have little, but I'm already getting a little bit of backlash. And you would have been talking to Ben, you know, 5 years ago, the guy that was in the gym, already knew everything about, you know, health. You know, you would have been talking to Rory, the physio, who's, you know, they're training him. We already knew everything, right? So, but we hadn't had our own product experience yet. So understand that there is a journey with that, and you can attract them if you can identify their pain points. Monica, starting again after a big pause because now they stay in great relationships instead of hunting them down. So yes, want to push it. And I'd challenge you to attract it, Monica. Step into that power and that true potential that you talked about and attract it. You don't need to push it if you attract it. Cool. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing that. And I guess I'll share one of mine as well. Probably the biggest challenge I had was, like I had 2 of my best friends get amazing results. And then I had one of my like probably the third person I shared it with. He was the person I probably wanted to help the most. And then he sent the program back, and he sent it back, didn't even use the program, and then proceeded to tell all of my friends how shit it was and all this type of stuff. And I'd had to go away on a 2-week retreat at that space. So I didn't have time to nullify and I probably didn't give him the service he needed. Right. But he's such an influence that he went and told all my network that it didn't work. So there was one guy that didn't even try the products, sent him back and proceeded to tell everyone how bad it was. And this guy, went on to sell drugs, and he went on and he's still 120 kilos, and he's still in the exact same position he was 5 years ago. But that was my biggest challenge early on. And that actually stopped me in my tracks for about 6 months. And it wasn't until I got more social proof, more results, helped more people around me, that I really started to see that. And the second thing as well is trying to help my mum. I've tried to help my mum 3 or 4 times over, and she's still in the same position she was health-wise 5 years ago. And I realized pretty quickly that, sometimes the people that we want to help the most are the last ones we can actually help. And they just need to be inspired to go on the journey in their own time, their own pace. And the best thing we can do is show up and give them support and love. And then, they'll take a step when they're ready. But we just need to hold that space. So anyway, Ben, on the last thing I want to ask you, dude, 3 things to run a successful Isagenix business in the next 5 years. What would they be?
To be fair, they're gonna be the development of certain traits that you're not expressing right now. Because if we look at your life, you're either expressing or suppressing certain traits that are inherent in all of us. Yep. You just need to become aware of which ones you're not without. You're just suppressing. You're not wanting to adopt that as far as your identity is concerned. Okay. So identifying those things, understanding what's going to allow you to flex those muscles into developing those traits and then expressing them more. Because again, if you keep flexing the same level of traits, you get the same song. You don't get a different song, right? Your life doesn't get to look different. And like for me, it becomes an art of losing yourself. You don't get to come along. You don't get to have a different life if you try to keep who you are around. It just doesn't work like that.
So just get rid of old Ben and find this new, truest version of Ben and start really stepping into that. Yeah. And learning like with an open mind, how to find that person or remembering who it was.
Yep. Like obviously a lot of things like grit. Like, so I'm going to like at the event we're doing, I'm going to give people all like the main core traits. I'm going to see where the levels are at. I'm going to find out where they're going to, where they think they're at and where their express version needs to be at, what needs to happen for them to start edging closer to that. How do we take those opportunities? Becoming self-aware around those things is paramount, because then you can know that you can start to take action on stuff, because you know that gets you a step closer to being able to be an expression of that trait that you know is more in service and can cause a different life. Because right now, you'd have the life you want if who you were showing up as right now was going to cause it. And the reality is you have to lose yourself. And it sounds like, again, we get told, just be yourself. No. You don't get to be yourself. And that might sound really not positive, and there's not going to be a fucking Instagram post that's done as a quote that you're going to click like on and swipe past and ignore and it did nothing. It's not going to be one of those. The reality is, if you yourself right now, it doesn't have what you want, then you don't get to come. Like, you can be you, but you have to be different expressions of traits you're expressing, if that makes sense. And you're not.
To be the truest version of yourself.
That's a bit. So the thing to be the most expressed version of you, to have the vision for your life, you need to be living as closest to the expression of the self that you know that you need to be to hold it, and then start to do things that are in service to that person.
Step into that.
Step into it. Yep. Grit. Okay. These are all things like grit, obviously, massive one. 80% of people quit at everything that they do. If you want to be 20%, you cannot be one of those people. Look, anyone who comes into this that's a great leverager that can leverage. Just and like
really leveraging Zoom calls, business calls, leveraging the systems, leveraging the events, leveraging the promotions, leveraging the compensation plan, leveraging the products. We don't have to create anything. It's already there, right? We just have to leverage it in the right way.
Leverage. People come into this and they know they need to leverage, but they feel like they're annoying their upline. And then there's nothing that annoys an upline like their team feeling like that. Right? All I did was get people exposed to Peter and through the events. And the more I did that, I started to learn, and eventually I could talk about it. But they were quite happy to do that. And I understand that was okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't being nuisance. because we're so accustomed to living in a society where it's like, oh, asking for people for help is annoying. In our industry, that doesn't fly. And people, that's the hardest thing for people to switch their mindset into, is understanding that you are required to leverage. We're not saying this to be nice people to you. We're saying this not because that is literally what has to happen. We're not doing it so you go, oh, I'd really love to help. Yeah, that is the case as well. But don't feel like that's the only reason. Like, that's literally what we're here to do. And the more you can do it, the better you get at exposing people, getting people on the calls with someone else that can do the talking, getting people to events. You're like, that's duplicable.
Yeah.
That's easy, right?
Yeah. So okay, let's get you. So basically learning to step into the truest version of yourself, which is, basically stepping in, holding that space and just doing it bit by bit by bit until the dream becomes a reality, right? And if you're not living that reality that you have in your mind, then you might have to lose yourself or the identity you have of yourself so you can step into that identity. So that's number one. That's a lot of self-development. That's books. That's being in positive communities. That's, asking for help and support. That's showing up and actually wanting to overcome those challenges. Yep. Second, grit, you said, is 80% of people quit as soon as they get one challenge. Like you talked about some vulnerability and some challenges you and Peter and everyone else had. I reckon 98% of people would quit if they had that, right? Groups created about you, things like that. Yeah. The truth is, in this day and age, the industry is probably more well known. Isagenix has more social proof, more integrity. I actually had a chat with a guy who works with all the best network marketing companies in the world, and he said Isagenix is the one that has maintained its value and its integrity amongst all of them. And he's seen about 10 to 15 quit. And he's like, if there was one that I'd join, it'd be Isagenix. And that was massive reinforcement for me. So don't quit over the next 5 years. Figure it out. Let it be messy. Let it do it in your own way. And the last one, Ben, was leverage. So, you said you leverage Peter. Find a leader. Find someone that is doing things and just leverage them, and then show up to events, because they're the two things that built your business over 5 years of it being messy, of you becoming conscious, of you stepping into that space where 5 years later you're living in Bali and you're now, got a $10,000 per week residual income. Now, not saying that's going to be the same for everyone else, because you maintained a level of action, learn, do, over that 5 years to actually get to this point. And that's, you earned the right to move up as you went, right? So they're the three key things, guys. I wanted to, Ben, I want to really thank you, brother. And we've gone about 15, well, practically 20 minutes over time. But, man, your consciousness, your story is really powerful. And if you have a minute, guys, just write one thing in the comment section that, Ben's helped you maybe self-realize, or maybe there's just one golden nugget that's just come to your mind. And I'll read those out as you take yourself off, as you take your camera off. I want to see your faces. Give Ben a big wave and a big high five and a thank you for his time. And yeah, from me to you, brother, thank you so much just for being here and for sharing this. And yeah, I look forward to seeing where the next 5 years can go, man.
No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone for jumping on. And again, guys, just don't live passively. That's all I can say. I just, I think about my mortality a lot, because it allows me to go, I don't want to be on my best deathbed thinking I lived a passive life. I just don't. And even if it means feeling things that are not great because I took action, I'd rather take that than live a life of avoidance. I just really would. And then watch what happens when you start to make that your understanding and what you want to do. You'll start to do things that you never thought that you could even do. Right. And then coincidences will start to show up. But they're luck. That's not luck. That's coincidence shown because you've gone and expressed something different. And again, just being passive bystander should be your fear. So just get into it. You just got to get into it.
Yeah. And I think Reese said this really well. Frustration from either growing into it or not growing into it. It's going to happen either way. We may as well get frustrated and grow into our truest potential. So on that note, brother, high five. Everyone give this good man a big wave. Take yourself off mute if you want to give him a ew. We'll see you all same time next week.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thanks, you.
All right, man. Peace out. I'll see you in Bali sometime this week.
Yeah, mate. No worries.
All right. Catch you guys.
See ya.